gateway of innovation, and we really lead in helping to address some of the world's most complex problems. We wanted to show you a brief video to give you a sense of all the innovation taking place in the great city of Houston, Texas, United States. So please direct your attention to the screen.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win.
Less than 7 years after President Kennedy's bold challenge from Rice University, the world witnessed one of the most remarkable moments in human history.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Those historic first steps represent hundreds of thousands of men and women working together to achieve a single goal. And like most historic firsts, required innovation, bravery, and sacrifice. Today, Houston remains at the forefront of innovation. We are the fastest growing metro in the United States, with a population of 7 million. We are an internationally connected city that leads across major industries, including energy, life sciences, manufacturing, and aerospace. Houston is a global knowledge capital where dreamers and doers collaborate to create technology that shapes the world. A leader in innovation requires a workforce that is prepared to meet tomorrow's challenges today. The region's extensive university network produces a large supply of young talent. In fact, Houston is one of the top cities in the U.S. for STEM and engineering graduates. Rice Space Institute is leading the way in the development of new ideas in the vast field of space exploration. Each new discovery brings us closer to new opportunity. Extraordinary innovations in commercial space are igniting an exciting new sector in the aerospace industry. Houston Spaceport is preparing to meet the needs of NASA and corporate customers with charter flights to space. Houston will be the largest city in the U.S. with a commercial spaceport. Phase 1 of the Houston Spaceport will be set up on more than 150 acres at Ellington Field in the heart of Houston. Houston also hosts SpaceCom, a conference and expo dedicated to fueling future discovery through the combined strength of private sector and government innovation. Houston is a great global city with one of the nation's leading economies and a center of international trade and investment. As the most diverse city in the U.S., Houston offers a unique quality of life and a rich blend of cultures expressed through a thriving food, entertainment, and art scene. The connection to human space exploration is an integral part of Houston's DNA. Houston has a bright future as a global leader in the aerospace industry. The future of human space exploration is here. Soon, we will return to the moon. Soon, we will set our sights on even more ambitious goals. Space Center Houston is a dynamic learning destination and is committed to making STEM learning available to everyone. Because innovation happens at the intersection of opportunity and inspiration. As the official visitor center of NASA Johnson Space Center, millions have visited Space Center Houston to learn about the rich history and breathtaking future of humans in space. Houston is known for many things, but perhaps none more than being Space City, the home of NASA Johnson Space Center, the site of historic mission control, and training ground for astronauts past, present, and future. This is Houston. Welcome to Space City, the gateway to innovation.
Great. Well, you all know who I am. So I want to tell you a little bit about Space Center Houston. We are the official visitor center for NASA Johnson Space Center and welcome more than 1.1 million visitors a year. And we are a dynamic learning destination. The great thing about visiting Space Center Houston, we are the official visitor center, so we take you behind the scenes to learn about what's going on around human space exploration. We're one of 14 visitor centers across the country, but we provide you with the greatest access to the actual labs and facilities within NASA. Something that we've introduced recently at Space Center Houston is a mobile guide, so visitors can learn more about our facility, and it includes augmented reality and virtual reality components. But something that's really exciting is we found that our guests downloaded it, it's absolutely free, but we're able to interact with them after they visit. And to give you a sense of our impact worldwide, 59% of our visitors have accessed our app after visiting Space Center Houston, and these are all the countries represented by those visitors. So we're the top destination for visitors to the city of Houston. Our education programs are very robust. We do a great program called Space Center University for youth ages 11 to 22, where you have a deep dive in engineering during a week-long course, where you actually interact with actual NASA scientists and engineers and develop prototypes for human habitat on Mars. So it's a really exciting program, and it have over 2,500 participants, and it's still growing. But it's only one of the many programs we have underway. We also are leaders in professional development for educators, providing STEM curriculum advancement, and also providing them with the tools to interpret and explain what current activities are happening in human space exploration. So now it gives me a great pleasure to introduce our moderator for the panel today and to provide some remarks, Tim Kopra. Tim is actually a partner with Bear Capital, but before that served for many years as a distinguished astronaut with NASA. He's actually been on many space missions and has been a commander of the International Space Station, but also had a very distinguished career in the U.S. Army. So please join me in welcoming to the podium Tim Kopra.
Thank you very much for being here. The early risers, the ones who come to the early sessions, so it's really nice to see a crowd gathering and very excited to share our experience in Houston and the great attributes that we have. And as you know, this is the 50th anniversary of the moon landing, and part of the reason that the Houston delegation is here is really to celebrate and honor that amazing and historic event, which was really centered out of Houston back in the day. A little bit about myself. Served as an astronaut for 18 years at Johnson Space Center, just south of downtown Houston. My first mission was in 2009. I launched on STS-127 on Space Shuttle Endeavour. Spent 2 months on board as one of the crew members of Expedition 20. It was the first time that we had all of the international partners represented on board Space Station. The Europeans, Russians, Japanese, Canadians, and United States. So 2 months and then came home on STS-128 on Space Shuttle Discovery. So I was able to fly on 2 separate vehicles. And then again in 2016, I flew to Space Station, this time after 2.5 years of training in Russia, launching out of Baikonur Cosmodrome, and with my crewmates Yuri Malenchenko and Tim Peake, British astronaut. And then I spent 6 months on board Space Station as part of Expedition 46 and Expedition 47. While we were on board, we had over 250 experiments, and really the metric of success for the International Space Station program is how much science we can actually perform while we're on board. Many people don't realize this amazing vehicle that we built over the past couple of decades. As big as a football field, but then probably the equivalent of about a 4-bedroom home, houses 6 crew members with all the life support, communications, and all the hardware and software needed to have 6 crew members survive in a very harsh environment. And this couldn't be done without Johnson Space Center and the ground team that is really a critical aspect of what we do on board the International Space Station. So, having lived in Houston for really the last 20 years, I grew up in Austin, Texas, and I knew about Houston. I visited Houston as a child, and it's been really amazing to me to watch the transformation of our city from the time I was a child to the time that we moved there in 1998 to the present, which has developed this city that is world-renowned in so many ways, but also a very livable city as well. You know, some of the stats I think that are really interesting are it's 7 million people, added a million people since 2010. It's the 15th largest economy in the world with a GDP of $490 billion. In the last decade, we've grown 1.4 million residents, created over 500,000 jobs, and we've added $100 billion to its GDP. And that's the reason that we've chosen, since I've left NASA, to stay in Houston. So I work with a venture fund called Blue Bear Capital, and we invest in data-driven technology companies within the energy supply chain. And as a city where it's really the capital of energy, but also space, that intersection is actually really valuable for any sort of venture or private equity firm from the standpoint of the talent base, the entrepreneurs that are there, and then also the potential customers, which has been very valuable to us. Also over 200 countries where we have trading relationships. So that's a critical aspect of the port that we have in Houston and all the relationships we have in business. But also Houston is a very livable and fun city as well. We raised our family in Houston, Texas, very happy with the schools and the opportunities that our family had while we were there. It's, if you compare Houston to the 20 most populous metropolitan areas, the cost of living is 26% less, cost of housing 42% less. So for someone on a government pay, able to survive and live and thrive in a really amazing city. You know, we're known as the most diverse city. I've heard our mayor, Mayor Turner, talk a few times about the fact that he had a conversation at a conference one time with the mayor of Los Angeles and the mayor of New York City, and they were having a little bit of an argument about who had the most diverse city. So who's to say? We think we have the most diverse city. And one of the really side benefits of having that, in addition to the talent base, is that we have over 10,000 restaurants with 70 different types of cuisine. The downtown area in Houston has really become a phenomenal place to hang out on weekends. 600 bars in Houston, so it's really become a fun city. And because of this focus on making Houston such a livable place, we are rated #1 among major metropolitan areas in total acreage of green space. So it's been a great city for us. So I briefly mentioned what we've done now at Houston at Johnson Space Center. We've built the International Space Station. We man it with our crews. We train the crews there. But over the past 58 years, Johnson Space Center has led the U.S. and the world in human exploration, discovery, and achievement in space. It's a place where we learned how to build and fly spaceships for the first time, how to dock them in space during Gemini, how to land them on the moon, how to take off from the moon, which is also a critical piece, and then how to build and operate a space shuttle. We use that space shuttle to build the International Space Station. And now we're in a position of trying to transition a lot of those capabilities to the civilian sector. And so here's a photograph, really a rendering of the spaceship that's going to land on the moon in 2021, built by Intuitive Machines. They're recently awarded a $77 million contract to deliver 5 payloads to the moon beginning in 2021 called Nova-C. So very exciting to see this beginning of the transition. But also, it's the home of over 250 aerospace companies that are responsible for manufacturing, research, and technology development within aerospace. And of the 50 largest aerospace manufacturing companies in the United States, 32 have a presence in Houston. So we mentioned a little bit in the video about Houston being the home of one of 12 licensed commercial spaceports. Here's a rendering of what it may look like in the future. But right now, Ellington Field is an operational airfield. It's where we flew the T-38s for space flight training at NASA. Same location where the initial Apollo astronauts learned how to fly down to the moon. They had a vehicle that took away the gravitational difference, and they learned how to fly this vehicle. In fact, maybe it's a little known fact among those people that aren't familiar with Apollo history, but it's also the location where Neil Armstrong had to punch out of one of those vehicles and land safely. So amazing airfield and amazing history. It's also the location of the Aerospace Support Center, which offers over 53,000 square feet of laboratory manufacturing and office space. Phase 1 of the Houston Spaceport will set up over 153 acres on Ellington Field with an additional 400 acres that will be used for as-built location. To include Johnson Space Center, they're going to locate a lot of their activities out at Ellington Field. And then once it's complete, Houston will be the largest city in the nation with a commercial spaceport. Tomorrow, Arturo Machaco will be talking about, there he is, we'll be talking about the spaceport. So I encourage you to come by at 2 o'clock and listen to Arturo. Houston is also the home of SpaceCom, which is one of the premier space conferences in the United States. It's been around for over 5 years now. It's a forum to learn how your company should plan and strategize to take advantage of this growing commercial space market, and also a pretty amazing networking opportunity with the C-suite people there, the executive management, legislative affairs, business development, R&D, and international community. So I encourage everyone to take a look at SpaceCom. And then we'll hear a little bit more about SpaceCom tomorrow again with Arturo when John Kajonder also gives a little bit more information about SpaceCom.
Votre attention, s'il vous plaît. Il est interdit de fumer dans les halls. Your attention, please. Smoking is forbidden in the halls.
And just a reminder, no smoking. One of the great things about Houston is the talent base and the educational institutions that we have within the city. We have over 30 universities and colleges within the city, to include Rice University and University of Houston, both of which are Tier 1 schools. There are over 430,000 students enrolled in Houston. And within that community, Rice and University of Houston have consistently been ranked as two of the top universities for entrepreneurship. What this has resulted in, both from the academic institutions and the influx of talent, is over 350,000 educated millennials within the city and 240,000 STEM workers within Houston. Rice is one of the top research universities in the United States. It's also been a key player in our space program. It's the home of the Rice Space Institute, which continues to be continue focusing on space research and creating the next generation of our researchers, scientists, and entrepreneurs. And David Alexander will be telling us more about that, excuse me, a little bit later today, and about the Rice Space Institute. So this is a map of the different entrepreneur spaces that we have within Houston. Houston is full of incubators, accelerators, co-working space, and other initiatives to foster innovation and entrepreneurship within the city. And as many of you know, there's really been a trend worldwide, but especially in the United States, and even more so in Houston, to take advantage of this trend towards entrepreneurship. And it has to be really a twofold approach. There has to be both this cultural shift towards entrepreneurship, but there's also a role for leadership, both in the city and within the organizations and institutions within the city to help that happen. And so one of those initiatives within the city is creating an innovation corridor. It's a 4-mile swath within the city that's going to be dedicated to innovation and entrepreneurship. And the centerpiece of this will be a renovation of what's this classic old Sears building that'll soon be called the Ion, a $100 million initiative from Rice University and their endowment to make this as a center for entrepreneurship. It will house incubators, accelerators, and the existing well-known incubator within the city, Station Houston, will also move there, which has over 700 members and 205 startups. It'll be a location for co-working, job training, university partnerships, and thought leadership, and provide over 300,000 square feet of working space. The surrounding 16 acres of the Ion will also be developed for multi-use space for residential, for dining, and for entertainment. I'd like to highlight a couple of other initiatives within the city that are focused on entrepreneurship. So TXRX Labs is a nonprofit hackerspace started back in 2008, and it's a location that has wood shop, machine shop, electronics lab, additive manufacturing, 3D printing, CNC machines, laser cutting, and robotics. And they're going to be moving from their current facility to this new facility this next March of of 2020 with over 306,000 square feet of multi-tenant manufacturing space. And out of that, 68,000 square feet is dedicated to an innovation space with over $2 million worth of equipment that entrepreneurs can use. And all of this will be connected with the rail system that we have within Houston. So just one more, the Cannon, which is a facility that's in Northwest Houston. It's a co-working ecosystem for Houston's entrepreneurs, small businesses, freelancers, creative people. Has over 175 companies and 375 members currently. They're moving from space that has 20,000 square feet to over 120,000 square feet. And even though it's not complete yet, it'll be complete in July. They're over 80% occupied with 105 of the 131 offices already pre-leased. And they have a region around this facility of 30 acres that'll be dedicated to what they're calling the Founders District, which will be an ecosystem for these entrepreneurs. So thank you for letting me say a little bit about Houston, our city that we love. You know, I've spent most of my career south of the city, and then the last 3 years, really much more time in the city, and just really grown to love the city and watching it transform into a world-class location for aerospace, for the medical community, for energy, and for entrepreneurship. And we're always looking for the best and the brightest companies to come locate in Houston and take advantage of all the opportunities that we have to help those companies prosper and grow. So what I'd like to do now is invite our panel up, and we're going to have a conversation about our city and all the opportunities that we have. So we could please welcome up Dave Alexander, Diane Gibbons, William Harris, John Kajander, Arturo Machuca, Horacio Licon.
And two of our, can you hear me? No. Two of our panelists are coming in a few minutes. They're a little late. I was supposed to get them, and they're coming a little late. So they'll join us in a minute.
Okay, I guess maybe the best way to start is for us just to go down the row, and you can spend about a minute, only a minute, to talk a little bit about yourself and what you do for Houston.
I'll start. My name is Horacio Licon. I'm the Vice President of International Investment and Trade with the Greater Houston Partnership. We are the oldest chamber of commerce in the state of Texas. We've been around since 1840, and all we do is promote the innovation that we develop there, and we attract companies to our region. So right now we're working with projects worth about $2.5 billion this year on new investments in the region. And if anyone here is interested in learning more about Houston and ways to establish a presence there, please have a conversation with me at the end.
William Harris, President and CEO of Space Center Houston. We are a dynamic learning destination science center and also the official visitor center for NASA Johnson Space Center, welcoming 1.1 million visitors a year. We take you behind the scenes to actually see the labs and facilities of NASA Johnson Space Center.
Thank you. I'm Tim Kopra. I'm just kidding. No, I'm not. I'm Diane Gibbons. I lead Trumbull and Mand. We're a Forbes Top 25 veteran-founded startup, and we're based in Houston, and we fly drones to collect, visualize, and analyze data for energy and government, primarily defense. Look forward to speaking with you all after.
My name is David Alexander. I'm a professor in astrophysics at Rice University. My other job is as the director of the Space Institute, where I get to work with these great people promoting space and space research, space exploration research in the city of Houston. And I look forward to talking to everyone later.
Good morning. I'm Arturo Machuca. I'm the general manager of Arlington Airport in the Houston Spaceport. I run the operations there, and I'm also in charge of the business development. And right now, we're making a big push to continue to grow Houston's presence in the aerospace industry. We have a lot of great news to share with you. Hopefully tomorrow, some of you can make it here. We will have a presentation with details about what's going on there at 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon.
So thank you all for being here. And I have a series of questions, and I've targeted some of you for the questions, but the rest, if I don't name you, you're welcome to chime on in. And so my first question really is targeted towards William and David. Really excited to be here at the Paris Air Show, especially with the 50th anniversary of the moon landing. And it's a great event. And all of us are huge space enthusiasts and aerospace enthusiasts, so we 100% understand how you can be excited and why we should be excited about space and aerospace in general. But for the general public, why should they care? And what's been important then? And what's important now and in the future? What's the way that we should try to educate and create the same kind of enthusiasm that we have for aerospace?
Well, thanks, Tim. So you can probably tell from the accent I'm not from Texas, but West Texas, North Texas. So as a European growing up, the Apollo mission sort of, obviously it was news worldwide, but it doesn't have the same reaction that they had in the United States. Having moved to Houston and having met the astronauts, the scientists and engineers many of whom helped make it happen, you sort of realize the huge impact that it had and continues to have. And I think we've been celebrating the folks and quite rightly this week, but for me the biggest thing that came out of that whole drive to the moon was the number of young people who wanted to either be astronauts or help put people into space. And to this day, 50 years later, we are still benefiting from that interest, and we have a whole aerospace industry in part because of the advances that were made out of that space program and that push to the moon. And I think as we continue on, we're all junkies about space, and we get to hang out with astronauts. And in Houston, there are a dime a dozen. So, but the impact that it's had and the excitement that you see young people having in space, the thing that drives them to change the world, is very evident. And if you think about one of the top space companies today is SpaceX and Elon Musk and Blue Origin with Jeff Bezos. They made their money on computers, which would not have been around if it wasn't for the Apollo program. And as soon as they made their money, they turned their heads back to space. That's how important it is. And I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from the past, but we take them to the future, and I think that's the key thing. And that's what we're all about in Houston, is by bringing the Space Center together with the universities and the city itself and the spaceport. So we're really excited to be part of this, and we're really excited to be part of this particular exposition this week.
I'll add that we're really excited because we've just restored the historic Mission Control Room at Johnson Space Center. So we invite all of you to come to Houston. It'll be open to the public as of July 1st. But we've actually taken it back to the 1960s because we're standing on the shoulders of those who've gone before. And what's so great about this year's conference at the Paris Air Show is that we're celebrating those heroes from the Apollo era, because they're heroes worldwide, not exclusively from the United States, because they achieved something remarkable for humankind. And it really has, I think, motivated innovation, creation, and we continue to do that through NASA. And what's so tremendous now is that we know that there's frozen water on the moon. We know there's frozen water in other celestial bodies, which means it can sustain life. We can travel to those bodies. And so we really want to immerse the public in understanding that, yes, we're celebrating this incredible achievement, but it's also enabling innovation now and moving into the future. We talked a little bit about the International Space Station. There are thousands of knowledge transfer and tech transfer that's come out of station that we enjoy every day, and you all hear about how powerful your iPhones are and smartphones and other things, but it is really tremendous. Everything from the innovation of the robotic arm that was developed by Canada that's now being used for very precise brain surgery, telehealth. You could go on and on. Fiber optic cable production in microgravity, when it was brought back to Earth, is 3 to 4 times the speed transmission than fiber optic fabricated here on Earth. So we really want to immerse youth and continue that innovation through insights in the space program. And so that's what we invite you all to come learn about in Houston and visiting Space Center Houston and NASA Johnson Space Center.
Thanks, guys. Just to echo what William and David said, I think it's beyond just the technology that was developed. For me, I was a 6-year-old when we first landed men on the moon. And for me, it was a phenomenal motivator, right? The reason that I chose to study hard in math and science was because of this really tangible goal. And I think that same kind of excitement, you see that starting to build now. And I think with these new lunar missions, it will just start to generate that kind of enthusiasm. Very exciting time, in my opinion. So a question for Horatio and Arturo. So we talked a little bit about the capabilities that we have in Houston, but it'd be great to get your take on why companies should establish, expand, or locate in Houston, or come from another country and use Houston as their launch pad, essentially, for international business. Who wants to go first?
Well, a very good reason that I can think of is obviously the Houston Spaceport. The Houston Spaceport is a location that Houston is developing right now with the intent of making sure that Houston stays relevant in commercial aerospace and aviation activities. We are building a very, very special facility. In 2015, we actually became the 10th commercial spaceport in the nation, actually one of 8 capable of hosting the type of operations that we do, which is horizontal operations, kind of what you've been seeing or reading about with Virgin Galactic. But while spaceflight becomes a reality for that type of operations, Houston has seen the possibility of making sure that we take advantage of all the great resources that we have in Houston. I'm talking about infrastructure. When we talk about infrastructure, I refer to the Houston airport system. I'm talking about the Port of Houston, the railways, the roadways. And then, of course, we have also the human resources. As Tim mentioned during his presentation, Houston is home to 7 million people. This almost ensures a unlimited pipeline of talent for companies coming to do business in Houston. We are working very closely with universities like Rice, San Jacinto College, and as a matter of fact, they just opened a facility at the Houston Spaceport to ensure that pipeline of workers is readily available for companies that come and do business at the Houston Spaceport and Houston, right? That is going on. Again, those are just some of the reasons, but as we're developing this opportunity, I think it's very important to remark that Houston is home to Johnson Space Center, NASA. With that, we have already in place 250 companies in the aerospace and aviation business. So it's not like this is something new. I believe that Houston continues to be a very, very strong proposition, and I think that's a very strong reason for companies to come and do business there.
Thanks, Arturo.
I'd say you want to be in Houston because it's an international city. You have the largest concentration, the third largest concentration of consulates in the United States is in Houston. But I would also say that one of the main things is that we're focusing the resources to solve problems that we think are the problems that matter. So we're focusing the efforts of our city are concentrated into solving health problems for the world. We're looking at solving the energy problems of the world. And those are big items, right? And we're looking into space. So we're looking into the future. The future is in space, and we're solving current, urgent items for the planet, right? We have an enormous brain power concentrating in solving these issues. And if you want to be really next to innovation that we think, again, matters, you want to be in a region. So things like every single phone that you have right now in your hand, the chemistry for that battery that you're holding in your hand, the lithium-ion battery, was developed in our state, in the state of Texas. Same with, I've been walking around the show, and it's great to see a lot of companies doing business with 3D printing technologies. Well, there are 2 technologies in 3D printing. One of the main technologies was invented in Texas as well. The idea came up in Houston during an internship, a summer internship. So SLS technology from UT was developed in our region. So if you want to be connected to the most transformative technologies that are impacting the planet right now, you want to be in Houston. The other area I'll mention is materials. We're developing all the polymer-based materials of the future, the nanomaterials of the future, and we're deep into new metals. So we have a great resource to solve problems that matter.
No, thanks, guys. That was great. You betcha.
So, sorry to pick up on the airtime, but I think the other thing that people don't fully realize about Houston is we have the world's biggest medical center, we're the global energy capital, and we have NASA Johnson Space Center, and there's a huge focus on data sciences now too. And what's really unique from my perspective, I've been there 15 years now, so I'm sold on the city, but is how all those things are in the same location and how everyone talks to each other and how those crossover technologies work, spinning out or spinning in or even spinning across. And I think that's something that makes Houston a pretty vibrant place when it comes to high tech.
No, those are great answers. You know, for me as a venture guy and relatively new one, only having done this for the past couple of years, what I've seen is that to have the entrepreneurs co-located with the customers and to have the relationships with them is really vital. So to your point about having problems that really need to be solved, when you're co-located, then you're able to understand that, whether it's in the medical community, the aerospace, or in our case, energy. That's a really valuable component. And the other piece I think that is probably not that evident to folks who don't live in Houston, but within those communities, they become really tight. So like the running joke among all the energy tech folks is that it feels like a small town. It's a small town with 7 million people, but you definitely get that sense within your community.
One thing that was mentioned earlier by Tim is that Houston is the most diverse city in America. And so you have a region where you have a lot of migrants, both domestic and foreign, who come together and really mix and add to that really vibrant conversation around different ideas and perspectives. And I think that adds a lot to why our economy is so robust and the city is such an attractive location.
Thank you. So going back to you, Arturo, and the spaceport, as we mentioned before, we have one of the 12 licensed spaceports, but it's going to be a competitive environment. It is a competitive environment. What are some of the things that differentiate our spaceport from those others?
Geography is without a question, one of the and location, one of the top two reasons. We are the only commercial spaceport in the middle of a large metro area. It's very important to highlight that. While we're now moving into, I guess, the new way of operating commercial space flight, Houston is the only city that has spaceport infrastructure. That makes us very different. We have, I already mentioned that part, access to all the resources that will make a success for the companies that come and do business, or an easy thing to achieve. We think that the Houston spaceport is right now just in the perfect position to make sure that we do our part to push commercial spaceflight and have that become a normal thing in the future. So I think that that's those are some of the most important reasons to make us different from other spaceports. Yes, others are and right now located in remote places. Well, again, we're in the middle of a city, right?
Hey, John, why don't you come up and join us? I'd add to that, Arturo, that being co-located with Johnson Space Center and the talent base there, and the spin-off companies from there, like Intuitive Machines and others, I think that makes it really an ideal location. So geography really is the right answer, I think. Diane, question for you. So you're a very smart woman, Air Force Academy graduate, very successful career, and now entrepreneur, very plugged in, as many people know, but you had lots of options on where you could have located your company. Why did you pick the Houston spaceport?
Thank you for that kind question. I also want to say John is late because of me, and I'm happy John's here and he's representing Spacecom, so I want to make sure he has a chance to talk about that. And so I guess questions for the audience. Who here has been to Houston? Raise your hand. Okay, so the Houston delegation has been there. Okay, well, and teamwork. So how many people want to go to Houston? Hopefully everyone else. Okay, raise their hand. So for those of you that have not been to Houston, it really does have everything. And for me, I am a Texan. I wanted to come back to Texas, but being in the Air Force, we moved all over. And for us starting the company, our choice was clear. We wanted to use drones to help environmental responsibility. We wanted to use drones in the energy sector, and Houston is the energy capital of the world. But we also have medicine. We also have space. We also have aerospace. We have now, NASA JSC. We have so many things there. So for me, the choice was crystal clear of where to go. And whether it's drones or spacecraft or aircraft, there's a joke. What makes planes fly? Money. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Well, so that's one of the jokes. The second joke is, I've told that to pilots, and they say pilots make aircraft fly, which is also true. And the other joke with pilots is, how do you learn if someone's a pilot? They'll tell you. So I just wanted to add some brevity. But again, seriously, Houston is the clear choice for energy. Houston's a clear choice for medicine. Houston's a clear choice for a spaceport. And I just want to say I'm happy you're here, and we're happy to answer your questions after.
Thanks a lot. That's great, Diane. So we've seen this trend of digital technology invading every industry, and we've seen really a transformation in aerospace, and even medicine, and energy. And in my opinion, having worked at Johnson Space Center, worked with NASA for a long time, a lot of that has come out of that. But for both John and you, Diane, how do you see the technology that's coming out of NASA and Johnson Space Center as a way to propel companies or to help them encourage their own growth?
Oh, good morning. So glad to be here. What we've seen is the growth of those various industries have created a confluence and an ability to not only do they find themselves having so many things together that they're a part of, but when you have an engine like NASA, and they over the years have created over 14,000 patents that are all public source, they're all open source, all available to the world essentially at no cost. And it's things like that that drive GPS that work in most cases, except this morning, to get me here. It's created a location ability to do, in oil and gas location, ability to refine advanced robotics, which is used now in surgery, which is used in advanced materials manufacturing, is used in the automotive industry. Because there's such a treasure trove of intellectual property in a community like Houston, you have an incredible ability to go across industry and make a real impact in the research development in terms of propelling your company forward. So I haven't seen anything like that in my 40-plus years of business.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. And though I can't speak directly to NASA JSC, working with them, we have worked with NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory on similar concepts. And so working with Chevron and NASA JPL, we worked with methane sensors and a laser spectrometer that was used on the Mars rover. And because it was developed there, technology transfer, we flew it on drones to test and track methane from the air. And so now that has been commercialized, and it's being used around the world to detect methane. So that's one example. Another example that we've supported with NASA JPL is we worked with Chevron to help develop an autonomous unmanned system to be flown indoors. So it's a dirigible, but it's also to be flown in explosive environments. So Class 1, Div 1, which is a really big deal. But why I'm saying those two examples, because that's the type of technology that is just waiting at JSC. So 14,000 opportunities that I think we should all start to take advantage of very soon. So I very much look forward to working with NASA JSC in a similar capacity.
Well, I just wanted to add that JSC actually does have a strategic partnerships office where they're really encouraging partnerships with the private sector, and they are trying to accelerate the use of those patents and other properties. They really want to put it out into the public realm for people to advance and develop into products that benefit humanity in some way. So happy to provide more information about how to link up to that office if anyone is interested.
And as part of that, that's why they developed SpaceCom, which is their conference where they bring all 10 NASA campuses together with the specific opportunity to talk research development, technology transfer, and commercial space development. And I look at advanced robotics is a great example of technologies that were developed at NASA in robotics, and now they're going to be using that so we have no more event horizons. They're able to then take unmanned welding and other work that goes underseas for those types of drilling platforms.
Tim, also, I just wanted to elaborate a little bit on the comment that you made about intuitive machines. Johnson Space Center, as part of the Return to the Moon program that we have for 2024, created CLPS, I believe is Commercial Lunar Payload Services. And at the Houston Spaceport, Houston Aerospace Support Center, we have a company, Intuitive Machines, which is a local startup that began operations back in 2015 that was just awarded the contract that Tim mentioned, $77 million, and that lunar lander is the result of that connection with Johnson Space Center. So that's that's a very clear example of how companies also benefit of the presence of Johnson and NASA in Houston.
One thing I would like to add, since we're all saying, is a lot of the focus has been about what NASA's doing, Johnson Space Center's doing, and how that feeds into these other industries, but it works the other way too. And I think that's one of the things that we've been trying to do with Spacecom is to build that conversation both up and down. And I think there's a lot of technologies that are being developed either for undersea exploration, oil and gas exploration, in the medical industry, that NASA needs these solutions if they're going to achieve their mission goals. And so that conversation back and forth not only allows technology transfer, but it also allows technologies to be improved because of the different demands of those two types of operations. And we've got lots of examples that I won't bore you with just now, but I think that's important for you to realize is that it's not necessarily you can just go to Houston and get something from NASA to help your business. You might be able to take what you have already and transfer that over to the space industry, and that's something that we're all very excited about too in Houston.
That's great. Thanks for all the input. So we talked a little bit before about the STEM talent that we have within Houston and the educational institutions that have really fostered this growth and really the influx of talent that we see actually every day as a venture fund and looking at entrepreneurs. But a question for David and William, at least to start out. What are some of the ways that the educational institutions and other organizations within Houston are helping to further that growth and prosper innovation within the city? David, William, who wants to go first?
Yeah, well, thank you. So, I mean, Rice is a small private university. We only have 3,900 undergraduates. We have more trees on campus than undergraduates. But we also have 2,500 graduate students, and so the big focus is on this research. And so I think a couple of things I'd like to mention is, like many of the other universities in Houston, and I think also around the world, the students are demanding more from their education. So it's not just about classroom activity and trying to teach them physics or astrophysics or whatever. They want to be able to solve real problems and take those problems out into the world. And so we have a big drive for our students to become business people. And so at Rice University and UH and Texas A&M and a whole number of the universities around us, there's new entrepreneurship programs being developed to train our students. We have a leadership institute specifically to take our students and teach them about leadership across across disciplines. So that's one thing that we're doing. Rice, just to promote Rice a little bit, Rice Alliance runs the world's biggest student business competition. And so they give out annual prizes of $2 million. Since their inception in 2000, they have developed over 1,800 startups who have got, I'm trying to remember my numbers here, but they've got something like $3.6 billion of early stage funding from those early starts. The competition is open to student groups from around the world. There's some rules about who can participate, but we've had winners from Germany, we've had winners from different parts of the United States. Occasionally we have a Houston winner, which is always good. And so that's something that we value very much as to what an educational facility like Rice ought to be. We also have developed a series of what's called professional master's programs in which our students learn technical areas. We have one in space studies, for example, so there'll be engineering or science, but they learn that in concert with business and management skills. And we give them entrepreneurship classes, networking classes, and so on. And so that's another way of broadening the educational offerings to cater to what the students want. Again, not all of them want to go into research and get PhDs and so on. They want to actually get the knowledge base to go out in the world and make a difference, and we're trying to accommodate that. And then the last thing I'd like to say is, very many times, places like NASA think of universities as, I don't know if you're all familiar with TRL, with technology readiness levels, and if you're 7, you're kind of flying already, and if you're 9, you've been flying for 40 years. And so universities are often seen to be 1 and 2, back of the envelope calculations, sort of prototype ideas. And that's true, and we're developing brand new technologies that 10 or 15 years from now you'll all be using, artificial intelligence, robotics, a whole range of different things. But because we're thinking about this translational aspect, there are technologies that are being developed in universities that are already in use in hospitals, for example, that we can translate into a space activity. Just one example to finish is we had a biophysics professor, bioengineering professor who was studying cancer and tuberculosis, and he was developing an imaging system for that. We've basically taken the microscope off it and stuck a telescope on it, and now we're actually building a mission to fly in space to do environmental monitoring and hyperspectral imaging of land use and water resources and all this sort of thing. The technology is exactly the same. But he was not thinking about space. He was thinking about the medical center. And these are the kind of things that universities do, is they incubate those kind of ideas, and then people like Tim and the companies around us and the spaceport provide the means by which those ideas can get off out into the world. So we've had a lot of conversations this week. We haven't heard enough of our panelists talk about universities. I think universities are crucial to us moving ahead in the future. Thank you.
Dan, you wanted to add something?
And so I love what is happening in Houston at the university level, at other levels. I love what William's doing at Space Center Houston. We also started a STEM 501c3 nonprofit. It's called Autonomy, spelled ME for Human-Centered AI, Digital Ethics, and STEM Empowerment. And the 3 groups we focus on for STEM empowerment are underrepresented or underserved youth, young girls, and then children, military families. And so those are areas I can relate to. And for us, we focus on 6th through 8th grade because that's before high school, before they take the technical math and science classes. But we also, do kindergarten, 1st grade, so early on, so that way they can go to a university like Rice. They can work at a place such as, Space Center Houston or NASA. And those are the areas we focus on. We work with Rice to start a drone camp. So we had 3 years in a row, a drone camp that was free to students, a $500 or $1,000 value. We took that concept to children, military families, service first, and we're working with entities like Rice, we're working with entities like Space Center Houston to continue to build that pipeline from the K through 12 level. So we think it's important to, again, work with these entities, and then there's a capacity issue. That's why we started. There was a 500-person wait list for our first drone camp of 25 people. So there's a desire to support STEM, there's a desire to do these things, and we want to help that grow within Houston.
Thanks, Diane. Yeah, I got a couple things, but then I'll give you the mic, unless you want it now. Yeah. No. Actually, I've actually spoken at the drone camp, and I think it's really important to catch them early, right? To motivate early, because it turns out that math, science, and engineering is hard. So find that motivation early. And going back to your point, David, about the integration of the different industries, I think it's a really seminal time now for really diverse and disparate industries to have overlaps. And so you could focus on aerospace, but what's been amazing to me is, like, for example, in energy, there's a company that does DNA sequencing to determine what's below ground by doing sequencing of microbes, because they're different depending on the region. So now you have this intersection of what's considered medicine, but intersecting with energy and oil and gas. And then there are satellites now with sensors that are looking at methane leak detection. So I think that the synergy of these different communities and industries in Houston is one of the greatest strengths, actually. So there is aerospace, but the fact that there's medical and that there's energy provides that kind of synergy.
I'll just add that we really begin very, very young with kids. We actually offer day camps beginning with 4-year-olds, and we actually teach classes in computational thinking, which will enable them then to code in any language, all the way through college. And so in all of our experiences relate directly to national and statewide teaching standards and requirements so that educators can link them directly to the classroom. But those are things that happen directly at our facility. We also are really active in remote learning classes. So we will often bring together youth remotely from all parts of the world. Recently through our Space U program, which is a 1-week deep engineering program, we had a cohort of students at Space Center Houston from Nigeria and Australia, and we linked in a group of students who were there also from Houston, and also a group from Costa Rica remotely. So we really believe in creating a web worldwide. The other thing I invite you all to participate in is we have a new initiative called the Innovation Gateway, and these are actually community science projects that anyone can participate in, and sometimes there's cash prizes associated with those. And so you can go on the site and NASA will put out, we're an allied partner for them on coming up with solutions, and you can learn about a challenge and participate in it. Recently we did one in partnership with a company, Jacobs Engineering, on developing a camera that would work in microgravity, but you had to buy the components at a retail store. So there are 2 big retail stores of electronics in the United States, Best Buy and Fry Electronics. And so you had to get them over-the-counter products and see how it would work in microgravity, and that came with a cash prize. In August of this year, we're actually going to be announcing, just a couple of months, the next Space Robotics Challenge, and that is in partnership again with NASA, and it's to develop a self-assembling rover for the moon. And that actually has a cash prize of up to $1.5 million. So we're really reaching out to everyone in the world to help us come up with ideas and solutions in a really creative way. But our goal is to engage people from a very young age, really build on their enthusiasm, engender in them those analytical, critical thinking skills, perseverance, how to work through adversity. So that's a common theme through all of our education programming, because that will serve all the programs throughout the city. But what you're hearing is that we have multiple opportunities throughout Houston, which is great. I think no one owns the corner on STEM. We have to do as much of it as possible.